So yeah, just a welcome to everyone, and it is we are genuinely happy to see you because we do apologise if anyone unfortunately had the technical issues and couldn't join us last time. So to see you here today is a vast improvement on last week, and we are very pleased to welcome you here today. So anyone that's been to these market briefings in the past will know that I'll do a little bit of housekeeping. So for anyone that hasn't had the pleasure of seeing me on the screen before, so I'm Alison Cairns from the MGAA, and just a little bit of information regarding the etiquette for our market briefing. So if I could ask, please, if you could keep your microphones and cameras off, as yes, ironically it helps us with technology. So we've got this far, and we would love to stay with you to the end. So yes, so please no cameras and microphones. And if anyone was going to start any AI note-taking tools, if they could refrain from doing so, as we don't have the required permissions. So those are the don'ts. The things that yes to do is please do ask questions as we go along. If you can pop them into the chat facility, and then what we'll do is cover them off at the end of the presentation. And also just to quickly mention that the session is accredited by the CII for CPD purposes. So if it does meet with your training needs, you can add this to your CPD log. So that's all my housekeeping over and done with. So today, very pleased to welcome Vitesse. So we have Ryan and Luke with us, and they are going to, I'll read out the title that I've got here somewhere. Won't be a minute. Streamlining Claims, because it's a little different to what's on the screen. Streamlining Claims Payments to reduce costs and enhance customer satisfaction. So I will delay no longer and hand over to Ryan and Luke to introduce themselves and get the briefing underway.
Perfect. Cheers, Alison. Hello, good afternoon, and thanks everyone for joining us. As Alison said, my name is Ryan and joined by my colleague Luke. Obviously you're all here for the MGA market briefing on our behalf. At least hope you are, because if not, then you're definitely in the wrong place. So quick bit of background on me. I'm Business Development Director here at Vitesse, and in terms of our structure, we're structured to focus on different market participants. So my area of focus is specifically around MGAs and TPAs. And for my sins, my background is now about 18 years in the insurance market. I've spent some of that time working for a broker, a couple of global corporate insurers, spent some time for working at an MGA and TPA as well. In terms of roles, predominantly operations and distribution. So that's me. Luke, over to you.
Yeah, hi everyone, pleasure to meet you all. So my name's Luke Baldwin. I'm also one of the business development directors, except I'm covering the carrier vertical, helping insurers kind of manage their funds and giving them control and visibility of their loss fund portfolios. In terms of background, I actually have a non-insurance background. I played professional rugby for 12 years. Retired just over 4 years ago, worked in banking for a little bit, and then I've been at Vitesse for the last 2 years.
Perfect. So just quickly to touch on learning objectives, as Alison said, you can log this towards your CPD. So I think, Alison, I'm right in saying I need to do a bit of a high level. But hopefully what you guys will take away from this is a better understanding of us as a business, how we're currently supporting different types of insurance businesses, but then more broadly to go through the items that you can see on the screen. So everything very much around what happens from a claims finance perspective. So hopefully we can achieve that, or at least some of that for you today. And as Alison said, any questions, pop them in the chat and we can pick these up at the end. So to kick us off, just wanted to give a real quick high-level overview of Vitesse. So for those that don't know us, or those that have heard of us maybe in isolated parts of the market, essentially we're an insurance-specific treasury management and claims payment solution. I think we've often been really closely associated with the Lloyd's market, and I think the reason for that is that 100% of the Lloyd's MAs are contracted with us, and it was very much our starting point in the insurance market. In terms of scale of the business, there's a couple of numbers on the screen. So we've processed over £12 billion in claims payments since we started. We're currently holding close to £1 billion on behalf of the market. Some names on the screen in terms of existing clients, so you can get an idea of the types of businesses that we're currently working with. And then probably the final thing I'd call out on here is the fact that we did a Series C fundraise towards the middle of last year. We raised $93 million, that investment coming from KKR. So I suppose in summary, very established, well-funded. And what's that done is it's enabled us to open up an office in the US, continue to grow out west, and also grow out our UK team, I think especially from a development perspective. So there's been a huge investment in terms of IT developers, and that's just to ensure that we can continue to evolve products and make sure we're kind of front of market with our proposition.
Yeah, so just diving into some of the questions that we often get when it comes to sort of risk and holding funds on behalf of our clients. So we are a multi-market regulated company under the FCA in London and the UK, DNB in Europe, and most recently in the US with our New York District financial license. What does this mean then? Well, ultimately, it allows us to hold money on behalf of our clients, which are fully separate from our corporate funds. So I'll run on to some of the safeguarding protocols that we have in place a little bit later in the slide. But ultimately, in the event that Vitesse become insolvent, the money is returned to whoever owns the funds on the platform. And similarly, as we'll come on to our kind of business model, if a TPA or third party that's accessing Vitesse in order to pay claims becomes insolvent, that money can also be pulled directly back into the holding funds of the capacity provider. Our banking partners are AAA rated, JP Morgan and Barclays specifically in the UK and the US, and then ABN AMRO in the European regions.
So on this, I suppose the purpose of us, what we're looking to achieve, we want to empower the insurance ecosystem with a unified platform that enables a secure real-time movement of claims funds. We want to be able to drive forward with innovation in this space. I think it's kind of been left behind a bit when you look at everything that's been innovated in our market. And yeah, just ensure that capital is being efficiently used across the industry. Our tagline, I suppose, if that's the right turn of phrase for it, is on the top of the screen: right money, right place, right time. The idea of that is just to ensure that everybody involved in this ecosystem has got what they need when they need it to make sure that we get the best outcomes for customers when it comes to claims payments. I suppose from a customer's point of view, if they're not particularly au fait with insurance, I think what a lot of them see is they pay a premium. When they make a claim, they expect their insurer to pay make that claim payment quite promptly back to them. And I think, as we all know, there's a huge amount of complexity that exists in our market. So it's not always as straightforward as insurer policyholder or insurer broker policyholder. Often you've got different types of businesses that exist within the ecosystem to make the policy and therefore the claim possible. And I suppose historically, sometimes what happened is that complexity can add some delays when it comes to the claim payment making its way from insurer or reinsurer through that ecosystem before it lands with the policyholder. And I think I've got first-hand experience of that. So when I worked at an MGA, we also acted as a TPA on behalf of other participants in the market. And I would have some insurers that would really overfund our loss funds. I would have other insurers that underfunded them or kept them very close to the mark. And when there weren't adequate funds in order for us to be able to make claims payments, what tended to happen was the customers would chase, the call centre would get flooded, the level of service we provided would deteriorate, and all of that ultimately come from not being able to hold the right level of funds in order to pay the claims. So I think what we do in kind of providing visibility of those funds is making sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, so moving on to in terms of the structure of what Vitesse looks like versus kind of the traditional loss fund model, this slide probably sums that up quite well. So just directing your attention to the left-hand side of the screen, ultimately the way a traditional kind of loss fund setup works today, the carrier will give a portion of funds to various TPAs in order to pay claims on their behalf, and then usually relies on a quarterly or monthly bordereau to find out how much is left in the fund, how many claims have been paid, etc., etc. So ultimately, very little visibility and control over their cash. If I then direct your attention just over to the right-hand side of the screen, you have kind of the Vitesse model. I think Ryan alluded to it, but ultimately we're trying to create a centralized system, a one-stop shop for all the stakeholders involved in that cash flow process to enhance the speed of payment ultimately to the end beneficiary and help with that cash flow management from a TPA point of view and also from a capacity provider point of view. So ultimately with Vitesse, the funds or loss fund will be held with our tier one banking partners, as I mentioned earlier, UK, JP Morgan and Barclays. We'll then set up these ledger accounts on the Vitesse system and we will provide access to whoever the third party is in order to pay those claims. So ultimately, what are the benefits here? Well, from a sort of risk and finance point of view, the funds are legally held on behalf of the person who actually owns the funds in the first place. You have real-time visibility and control over these lost funds at all times, whether via logging into our online interface and downloading the reports or scheduling monthly reports, which we can automate for you, or also by connecting via our API. The second part, just in terms of that claimant experience, is once you've contracted with Vitesse, we can set up these e-ledger accounts in 48 hours is our SLA, but most often it's done same day. Once those are then funded, we provide access to the third party and payments can be made real time. And I think Ryan showed it at the start of the call, but 70% of our payments on the platform are made in real time. So yeah, how we do it, ultimately, this kind of a summary of sort of the three pillars of what we try and offer. The first, I've kind of gone into some detail on it already, but providing visibility and control to all the stakeholders involved in that cash flow process. The second point is an interesting one, and we'll dive into some more detail on this kind of loss fund onboarding, loss fund optimization piece, which is another one of the services that we offer. But we can actually do a full deep dive on your loss fund portfolio, identify any legacy or dormant funds and return those back to you, as well as migrating active funds onto Vitesse. And we've seen with some of our clients, as you can see from the stats there, that up to 80% of funds can be actually returned to your balance sheet, and then we'll manage the active funds on the Vitesse system moving forward. The third point of view, again, it depends kind of which lens you're looking at it from, I suppose, but is the claimant experience. So I've mentioned about kind of speed of setup in terms of setting up these funds. But actually, we've got various payment methods and account structures that can help service your beneficiaries, you know, in our view, far better than perhaps the existing process is done today. We have a global payment network, which covers obviously, you know, the vast majority of regions across the world. And similarly, we have a variety of different payments methods you can choose. So we have a service in place at the moment called Pay Choice, which allows the customer to decide how they wish to be paid, whether that be by check, e-check, direct bank transfer, etc., etc. So if you choose to implement that kind of pay choice strategy, then the customer is in control of how they would actually like to get paid.
Yeah, and Luke, I was just going to say, actually, I've got real life experience to that last point. So I had a home insurance claim last year. I won't name any names, but was insured with an MGA, notified them of a loss. They had a really slick F&O journey. I think they had a loss adjuster out within 48 hours. He made a cash settlement offer that day or maybe the next day. I think I accepted 48 hours later, and then I got an automated email that said, your claim's been authorised, your funds will be with you in 5 to 10 working days. And I think we've made such huge ground in terms of the slickness of some of that journey. And I think sometimes this can be kind of the forgotten part, that final transactional movement to the client.
Again, this just dives into a little bit more detail on how we protect your funds. So I've mentioned about being multi-market regulated, and we also have kind of supplement and segregation method, which provides an insurance which is approved by the FCA. But I won't go into a huge amount of detail here because we'll share the deck afterwards. But I've mentioned about our tier 1 AAA rated banking partners. We've also got an internal system and personnel that cover us from a governance perspective, as well as a number of kind of policies and systems and controls to ensure that access is only given to those that require it. Again, to kind of bring this to life on the system, when you set up an account, there'll be an account admin. They will be in charge from a client point of view of adding additional users. In terms of that payment process that I mentioned earlier to those third parties, they'll be only given access to the accounts that they're involved in. So for example, you could be a capacity provider that works with, a huge number of different TPAs, DCAs, MGAs that pay claims on your behalf. They would only be given access to the accounts that they, are directly involved in. And in terms of that payment input and payment approval service, there's two methods. So that you've got one person that will input a payment and then one person that will then approve that payment. So there are a number of different kind of safeguarding measures that are put in place to ensure that your money is safe at all times. And this ties up, with a pretty nice summary. FCA regulated. I think one point that is really key to stress in this is that your funds are segregated from our corporate funds. And also aside from any other clients on the Vitesse platform, and we have that AAA rated tier 1 banking security.
And I suppose I think we've touched on this, but for any of you that are making cross-border payments, we've got local banking connections in about 100 countries. We're able to pay out domestically in over 60 currencies, and that allows us to make fast, full domestic payments to customers. I think sometimes when you go through other banking routes, the customer can end up losing out on money due to charges that have been made. I think you've touched on one of these already. We've got a couple of quite exciting products that are listed on here. So one of them's Merchant Pay. Merchant Pay is a way of, if you're paying suppliers frequently, enables you to bulk up those payments and schedule them. And I suppose what that can do is reduce transaction costs because you're reducing the number of transactions being made. But we've also seen clients utilise that and leverage it to negotiate improved commercial terms with some of their suppliers. And obviously you've touched on pay choice. I think for me, one of the benefits of pay choice is the fact that when I've had conversations with MGAs and TPAs, obviously ordinarily you assess the claim, you authorise the claim, and then you pass that instruction to a bank or to someone like us to actually push that payment out. With Merchant Pay, what it stops you having to do is ultimately to go and collect or store those payment details from the client. So without pay choice, the MGA, TPA insurer contacts the customer, takes those payment details, passes them on to the bank or passes them on to us, often stored in their system. Whereas with pay choice, what happens is the claim gets authorised, the instruction comes to us, we brand up a communication that goes out to the customer that says, your claim's been authorised, how would you like to receive your money? The customer then provides us with those details. So I suppose the data protection onus is then on us and the actual collection onus is on us, as opposed to it being on the person in the ecosystem that's actually paying the claim. And again, I feel like I might be looping back over a few bits you've already said, Luke. But the contracting party can provide access to real-time view and fund balances and payments to whoever they choose to. So I suppose as an example of that, if the contracting party is an MGA, they work with an insurer and a TPA, they can provide view-only access to the insurer so they can see the funds whilst providing the TPA with access to actually go in and make payments out to customers. As you've also said, Luke, I think full suite of reports. I think the benefit of that is the feedback we've had from clients is making their reconciliation work much easier. And as I say, you can customise, tinker, ingest them into your platform. And again, I think you've already touched on this, but you can use our platform in isolation, but also you can API into your existing claims or policy administration system. So kind of however you choose to work with us, we can be flexible and accommodate.
And then I guess shifting the angle a little bit in terms of kind of the treasury management that we spoke about at the start of the call. But, you know, there is actually the possibility to generate interest on your claims funds that are held on Vitesse. So again, rather than you giving, you know, millions of dollars to your third parties in order to pay your claims, we can set it up in a way that they'd still be able to do this as they do today, but you would actually be holding the funds yourselves on the Vitesse system. And if you hold over a certain balance, which as you can see on the screen is sort of 10 million in one currency across sterling, dollar or euro, you can actually get an interest return on this balance. I think just as an FYI, so the interest is earned daily and paid back to you quarterly, and is another really good way of kind of putting some money back on your balance sheet that perhaps you might not have been able to do previously. The next element kind of goes into our loss fund onboarding, loss fund optimization proposition, and I'll bring that to life shortly after this with a bit of a case study example. But ultimately, again, if a client decides to engage in a full project with us, they would send us through their kind of loss fund portfolio. We request a number of data points, you know, relating to broker, loss fund value, TPA partners, etc. And then we would do a full analysis of these funds and then decide kind of a phased approach then to migrating onto the Vitesse system. So from the recovery element, we would reach out, you know, Vitesse would do all the legwork with your partners and whoever is involved in those claims funds. We would directly reach out to them, do a full reconciliation of the accounts, and then return any idle, dormant funds, inactive funds back to your balance sheet and back to you. And then the remaining active funds would then be onboarded onto Vitesse. That would start off as kind of a proof of concept, usually by selecting a couple of TPA partners that we work with and work well today. They're experienced with this kind of project, and then look to ramp up to kind of do the full suite of that entire portfolio. So just to bring that to life, we had a client who thought that they had $30 million in their kind of loss fund portfolio. We've migrated that over to the Vitesse platform, but we also recovered $60 million, and that's not an over-exaggeration, $60 million back to them in idle funds that we'd found through doing the loss fund recovery process. And then I think just to close up, you know, where we see the benefits of Vitesse, you know, I think one thing certainly that I've found since I've joined is that there's often disconnect between certain departmental functions within the business. And, you know, we have benefits to claims, we have benefits to finance, to risk, to operations, etc. But we kind of bucket these into sort of three key areas. We've obviously spoken in detail from the claims point of view, but from a finance point of view, given kind of the treasury management tools that we have, there's obviously new investment opportunities with those returned funds and the potential interest that can be earned off holding funds into Vitesse, as well as, you know, finance are going to want to have oversight for auditing purposes on the real-time payment data that you can access via Vitesse. From a risk point of view, I think we've hammered it home enough, but that tier one banking structure that we operate in, as well as having those segregated funds, are really important, particularly from a risk point of view. And then operationally, again, from that first slide that Ryan showed, you can see how complex that insurance model can be. And ultimately, the problem we're trying to solve is to centralize that into one system so that from an internal operational point of view, everyone is connected. Everyone has one real-time view of where their money is in the right place at the right time.
Cool. So finally, I suppose just to recap, I think these have to be on the screen again to get your CPD. I'll leave them up. I won't read through them. But hopefully we've ticked a few of the boxes. You've taken something away from this session. And yeah, I think that's it for me, Luke. Unless you've got anything to add before we pass over and go to some questions.
Nothing from me. Thank you for listening.
So yeah, thank you very much. I just looked at the questions, and we don't have any at the moment, but I always like to talk for a little while just in case anyone is typing. Don't want to put any pressure on them. But I suppose from my perspective, I think it's very interesting to see that there are still occasions now where the customer has the payment will be with you in 5 to 10 days, which is frustrating when you know that you can sit on your sofa and transfer a payment and it's literally gone at the touch of a
Yeah.
button. But so I think, yeah, and anything that addresses that for the claimant who genuinely needs that money at that point is not a bad thing.
No.
I suppose only one question, just in case there is anyone typing. Sort of in terms of the implementation, is there I know you were saying about I can't remember what the word was, like a trial period. Is there a sort of a time frame of how long it might take to be onboarded?
Yeah, happy to pick that one up, Ryan. No, there isn't, is ultimately the answer. It's kind of at the discretion of how the client wants to move. So in terms of that kind of LFO loss fund onboarding project that I was talking about, the way that would work is that we'd obviously do the contracting. Once that was contracted, then we'd have, an initial project kickoff call ultimately with the solutions and implementations team to do a run through of those data points that I mentioned earlier and to kind of establish a project plan. It very much varies from client to client. We've had some clients that very much, want to do it on a few binders or a couple of TPA partners. There have been some that have said, look, let's just get this project moving and kind of do a full ramp. So we're very agile in that respect. I think as a company, we market ourselves as more consultative as opposed to kind of, pushing our products on people, and we'll move at whatever pace the client chooses.
Thank you very much. Just looking, there isn't any questions, so I think we're safe to assume that everyone is full of knowledge on the service that you offer and how it operates. But yes, just to let everyone know that we will add an additional slide in which will have contact details. So anyone with us today or who's watching the recording, the next slide you will see will have contact details on it. So if anyone has any questions about implementation or any questions at all, you'll be able to contact Ryan and Luke. So yeah, so I think that leads me to thank Vitesse for joining us today and sharing that update, and thank everyone for joining, and apologise again if anyone tried to join the other week and wasn't successful. So yes, thank you very much. I'll leave you to enjoy the sunshine.
Perfect.
Thanks
Thanks everyone.
all. Take care. Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.